another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the April release for this year, which is in fact the Helliax riff written by Scott Handcock, another Fifth Doctor story. Previously in these reviews I have also taken a look at the 2018 Fifth Doctor trilogy starring Tegan, Nessa and Adric. This is in fact a completely different era of stories. This is in fact the beginning of a little bit of a trilogy. I do believe it's kind of a loose arc because I don't think it's actually continuing in the next monthly range story, meaning that it'll probably be continued at some point in the future. But we see the Fifth Doctor in a standalone episode for this release with kind of a new companion, kind of a companion in an unofficial way sort of thing. First off, and as always, in the description below, I will leave the link to come by this release from Big Finish website. It's currently out now. The physical edition is $14.99, and then you do also get the download for $12.99 as well. And if you're interested by what I say in this review, you can also take a look at the cover art as well as the digital trailer on the Big Finish website as well, along with the episode details for this story and the cast list. And this episode, as I say, is written by Scott Handcock, and it is directed by Jamie Anderson. This review, I am in fact going to need to really try very, very hard to not call this episode the Halifax Rift, because I do believe that I said in the previous review it was called the Halifax Rift, and then previously already whilst filming this video I've called it the Halifax Rift several times, as opposed to calling it the Helliax Rift. And as you all probably know, Halifax is a bank and I do believe a place as well, so yeah, I'm going to try not call it Halifax throughout this review. However, if I do, please just ignore it and put the word Helliax on top of that, because, you know, they are pretty similar and it is pretty early in the morning. So it is a standalone Fifth Doctor story, and it is completely unrelated to the other episodes that we've seen so far this year with the Fifth Doctor, and I like that. I feel that especially in the other reviews that I've done so far this year, I feel that Fifth Doctor hasn't really been given too much time to breathe. I think that he needs his character developing a little bit more, and certainly when we have these episodes when it's either him as a standalone Doctor or him and say Nessa together, I think that's when we really see this Doctor coming to the forefront and actually developing his character a little bit further, and this story definitely sees that. I love the way that his Doctor actually interacts with different humans, and I feel that definitely this story gave a very new series vibe from the Doctor in himself and the characteristics that he had. The way that he interacted with humans sort of reminded me very much of the 10th Doctor, because he always feels sort of like a powerful character that isn't really imposing his power in a complete sort of powerful way sort of thing. He knows that he's always one step ahead of everybody else, as sort of one of the people in the story actually needs to sort of keep tabs on him and make sure he doesn't really step out of line or do anything wrong. In reality, by the very end of the episode, he just kind of becomes his companion or assistant and kind of just helps him out, because he realises that the Doctor always knows what he's going to do next, meaning that he's kind of very hard to actually keep control of. He's a little bit like an insane sort of small child or a really small puppy, because he can just do whatever he wants. He kind of can control anybody without sort of imposing authority, which I do quite like. And the Fifth Doctor in this story, in fact, was very enjoyable as well. I found that his Doctor really nicely flowed throughout this episode. I think that Scott Handcock really nicely got his character and sort of really understood his certain gestures and characteristics, and the way especially throughout the story when even interacting with the minor characters that we never see throughout the story again, that are literally in it for about sort of 2 minutes or something like that, he actually sort of has proper little conversations with them and kind of enjoys being with these humans, and he kind of feels like this adventurer that is going around sort of the universe and kind of just enjoying it, and then occasionally stumbling into danger, which I do quite like. And a companion figure for this story is played by Blake Harrison, and he's Lieutenant Daniel Hopkins, and he's basically the guy from The Inbetweeners, and he was also in that thing called Trust Me with Jodie Whittaker last year, where he kind of played the husband character. And yeah, he was a rather interesting character to get into Doctor Who, I must admit, because I'm surprised that he's not been in it yet, I don't believe. So yeah, he is a character that is pretty much filling in for the companion role throughout the story, and what I'm gathering is he is basically the story arc. I feel that he's the character that we're going to see throughout this arc and sort of return to the Fifth Doctor, because at the very end of this story we see the Doctor actually say, "Would you like to come with me in the TARDIS?" and he says no, because he has a wife and sort of a kid on the way, so he sort of wants to be with normal life and he has everything that he wants on Earth, which I think is a really nice way to sort of look at it. But I like his character because he is basically the upgrade from Harry Sullivan. He's got the same sort of job as him. However, he's a character that is very much placed into this army background. However, he doesn't really want to kill people. He doesn't know how to impose authority, but he kind of at the same time has a completely different way of thinking, especially when compared to the Doctor, where they get into a little bit of trouble throughout the story, where they go to kind of this manor place or this big massive sort of home institution type thing, and the Doctor gets caught up in a few problems, and we think that, oh no, you know, everything is going to go wrong. However, it turns out that Daniel Hopkins is in fact kind of sent some Morse code to his fellow army sort of cadet people in unit to in fact come to this place and actually help them out before anything goes out of control. And I like the way that kind of the Doctor was really in trouble throughout the story. However, Daniel Hopkins kind of actually saved him, sort of thing. I mean, of course, the Doctor would have got out of it anyway, regardless, but I still think that he's a nice character and interacts rather nicely with the Doctor, and you can tell from the very sort of offset of this story that those two characters really nicely fit together. They kind of bounce off each other rather nicely, and at the same time, I kind of feel that he is sort of not exactly in awe of the Doctor, but he knows he's this alien from outer space that basically knows what he's doing, and he knows that he's basically essentially playing sort of Daniel's sort of thoughts process, because he knows that no matter what, even if he's going to try and keep tabs on him as much as possible, he will know that eventually he will escape and go and do his own thing. So I do like the way that they kind of have sort of a story where they have to go along with each other throughout it, but they kind of get to the grips with each other at the same time and kind of like each other by the very end of it as well. At the same time, I can't help but think we have a little bit more of his characters to sort of be revealed in later stories, which I'm quite interested to see where this actual trilogy goes. This is additional reference as well, a few of the other characters throughout the story. We have Russ Bain as Lieutenant Colonel Lewis Price, which is basically your brigadier kind of character, but he's a little bit more sort of, not exactly evil, but he kind of wants to impose authority. As I say, he's very much sort of your army colonel type character, a little bit less sort of chilled than we've seen in previous unit stories, which is rather interesting. Then we have Guinevere Gaunt as Corporal Linda Maxwell, who's a female, and in unit in the 1980s, that is in fact kind of rare, so I do quite like that, sort of stepping up the variety a little bit. She was rather nice. You have Deborah Thomas as Annabelle Morden, Anna Louise Plowman as Jennifer Harrison, who's a doctor in the story. Then we have Robbie Stevens as Morris, and finally Jake Dubman as Samuel. So it's a rather sort of small confined story, but this really allows for each individual character to actually have some time to breathe and actually time to develop. And I felt like I knew all the characters throughout this story, especially when I felt that this episode was mainly based around the Doctor and sort of Blake Harrison's character. I kind of feel that it was all about them, and everybody else was kind of background characters. And the main sort of villain, I suppose, for this story, who is Dr. Jennifer Harrison, and she is a female once again, which is nice. I think that once again Scott Handcock has actually sort of developed a little bit of a sort of difference compared to other classic series Doctor Who stories, but we got of this kind of manor house place that is carrying out autopsies on extraterrestrial life, so it is a little bit unusual. However, at the very end of this story, I feel that we get revealed to this whole new level, possibly maybe a little bit too late. I kind of feel that we could have had it brought into the story a little bit earlier on, maybe less of sort of the unit and the countryside stuff, and maybe bringing in the aliens and kind of developing that a little bit further, because I felt there was definitely a story there that could have been told that necessarily wasn't told, so maybe that might have been carried on in the other sort of stories in the future. Who knows? But yeah, I think that generally it's a rather interesting concept, and it doesn't feel completely like classic series Doctor Who. I feel like it has new series elements in there, especially, in fact, the main theme of this story, which I will get onto now. So if you're somebody who doesn't really want to know any spoilers for this episode, then I probably recommend clicking ahead maybe 2 or so minutes, because this is kind of like a major plot point. Jennifer Harrison is in fact a mother, and she is keeping her son within sort of this asylum type prison place because he is half alien, because her husband died and this alien came to Earth and basically sort of took on the form of her husband, and it felt like the husband never left, and they kind of ended up getting together, having this child. But because he's an alien, of course, alien add human doesn't equal child, you know, in sort of a normal humanitarian kind of way. It equals sort of weird alien human hybrid child. And yeah, like the 11 to an extent, where he can sort of turn off the power in certain rooms, which I think, now I'm saying this, I actually can recall to certain other things that I've listened to and sort of watched in the media, where you have kind of these characters that can control electricity in kind of the house, and sort of the way that if they scream, sort of light bulbs will crash, that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily like a new sort of thing. I think that definitely Scott Handcock has had a little bit of inspiration from other external media, but at the same time it's nice to have a classic Doctor Who story aimed around this area, because I don't think I've ever listened to a classic Doctor Who story quite like this one, because it is very much, I want to say, a bit Torchwood, you know, because you kind of have that idea of human and alien sort of giving birth to child, and you know, it's a bit odd. And then the husband alien runs away, and then eventually sort of the alien son is in fact in this asylum, and he's reaching out, kind of trying to contact his father because he's in pain or something like that. It's also quite nice to have a little bit of a unit story as well, based in classic series Doctor Who, because of course we do have Unit, the new series, which is based around Kate Stewart and Osgood, and sort of the new fraction of Unit. However, we very rarely go into actual Unit in the classic series and see the classic Doctors kind of team up with Unit from the classic series, and necessarily, of course, we can't have the Brigadier in there because unfortunately Nicholas Courtney is no longer with us, which is very, very sad. Beyond that, it is basically Unit trying to track onto this rather extraterrestrial alien signal, and they don't quite know what's going on. So yeah, it's a little bit of your sort of standard Unit story, but at the same time, Scott Handcock has a way and sort of has a style to bring his own into Doctor Who. I think that especially after listening to The War Master, the reason why I'm pointing over there is because it's on my shelf and I've just sort of remembered it's there. When listening to The War Master, I kind of felt that it's very cinematic and it kind of has its own style, and it brings Doctor Who into kind of like a new era, almost like a new sort of Netflix online streaming series, something like that. It has a completely different style to actual Doctor Who. And I feel that this story, once again, Scott Handcock has broke that boundary, and it actually feels like a Fifth Doctor story brought into the 21st century with those new series kind of techniques in there of making the Fifth Doctor a little bit more like a new series Doctor. So therefore, I do kind of recommend this to maybe the new series audience as well, because it is a sort of a standalone story. I could say that you could probably listen to this episode and not know the rest of the stuff that happens with, say, Daniel Hopkins in other episodes. I think it is a nice standalone episode. I just have a little bit of a difference with it. I just it's differently when compared to other sort of main range stories, which I suppose is a good thing. I think that the whole concept throughout the story of having kind of this alien asylum where you have these people coming to Earth to kind of receive this medical treatment, and then their parents come along to actually help them, and then they end up being trapped in kind of this asylum as well. It feels rather unusual, but at the same time, I kind of felt that it did have potential to be developed a little bit further, because it's just one of those things that is rather interesting, seeing all of these patients and kind of asylum sort of victims being let out of their cages and sort of let loose in this asylum. It does feel a little bit like New Earth, kind of, because you have them all strolling around and the Doctor needs to try and escape along with the rest of the Unit personnel. And yeah, I just felt it had a little bit of an opportunity to develop that a little bit further. However, it didn't, but that may sort of take place in another story. Who knows, maybe the main character, who is sort of that alien-human hybrid, might actually sort of return in other stories as well. Who knows? I like the story for what it does, I think, but it could have had a few tweaks in there as well. Okay, that's that for this review. I hope you've enjoyed it. Generally, overall, I do recommend this episode more to the new series audience as opposed to the more classic experienced Big Finish listener, partly because it's nice to have the opportunity to in fact have a classic series Doctor Who episode that is more aimed towards the new series kind of viewer, because you don't really need any other context for the story, and it's just nice to kind of have a relaxing episode that you can listen to all in one, a 1-2 hour story, and actually kind of really get to grips with the characters, as I say, and kind of just enjoy the Fifth Doctor without having all of his companions there, because I think that it can be a little bit of a burden sometimes to have them in there, so it's to have a little bit of breathing space with this character. So yeah, overall a rather nice story, and I'm interested to see where this trilogy goes next. And I guess that's it for this review. Next month I will be going into the Sixth Doctor stories for the first episode of the Sixth Doctor trilogy for 2018, which is of course The Law of Nomad, and I do believe that it is written by Matthew J. Elliott, and then we're going to Iron Bright after that as well, which is the first episode to in fact feature the brand new design of cover, which has been altered to sort of cater for the new Jodie Whittaker logo. It in fact features Isambard Kingdom Brunel, so I'm very, very excited for that one, and naturally I'm excited anyway because it is of course the Sixth Doctor, so yeah, that will naturally trigger me very, very much, so I can't wait to see what goes on with those stories in the later months. Thanks for watching this review, and I'll see you all in the next video at some point in the near future. Bye for now.